I sat in the windowless room, light pooled onto the polished oak table, illuminating a stack of papers that looked heavier than any script I'd ever tried to write. There was a row of professors, all with brows furrowed the way only tenured academics could manage. My hands trembled, brushing the rough edges of my project proposal with my fingertips, as if I could relieve its weight that way. Professor Serafini adjusted his glasses, exhaling as he leaned forward. I counted the coins in my pocket, those few euros for a cappuccino after, 5 committee members, 5 pairs of indifferent eyes. My mother had always said the world had a price for dreamers. Today it felt especially true. Valerio, I understand your enthusiasm, Serafini began, his tone paternal, but a documentary about the street musicians of Rome, is this truly worthy of a thesis at La Sapienza University? Laughter, muffled and sharp, pinged around the room. Professor Gambetti smiled tight-lipped. I started, searching for my words. I'd rehearsed this for days in front of the mirror, watching the lines on my face, trying to will myself to look older, more certain. We see them every day on Via del Corso in Trastevere. We never see their stories. Their music is Rome, don't you think? Valerio, Professor Cotogni interrupted, you are not a director or a musician. Why not focus on something with academic merit, an auteur analysis perhaps, or an ethnographic examination of old Roman dialect? The words strung worse each time. It was already known in my family. Valerio wants to make films, so silly. Now academia confirmed what my cousins and their friends had chirped about for months. Stories aren't something Italians like me make, not from working-class Garbatella, not with a father who repaired refrigerators in Testaccio for 30 years. I tried to steady my voice, but it broke. I think it matters. You can't just point a camera at beggars and call it cinema. Professor Gambetti sounded bored. We'll have to reject your proposal. They scribbled their notes. My world narrowed into the sound of pens scratching paper. I waited for permission to leave but got only silence. My own breath felt too loud. Outside, Rome was bright with spring. The Tiber glinted beyond the railings. I wandered until I found a bench behind the Pantheon where an old man played the trumpet next to his open case. Coins glimmered like fallen stars. I wanted to crawl into that instrument and hide. Instead, I hunkered down and let myself hurt. That night dinner with the family was a predictable parade. Mama gestured at the bowl of pasta, her lips tight. So, she prompted, did they accept it? I swallowed, feeling the spaghetti stick in my throat. No. My uncle Gianni snorted, it's all nonsense. In my day you learned to weld or you went hungry. My cousin Luca grinned wolfishly. Documentaries, he said, imitating my voice, I'll be like Scorsese. Maybe next week you'll want to be a philosopher. His girlfriend covered her mouth, stifling a laugh. Even Nonna didn't defend me, focusing on her soup. The clock ticked behind their voices. I looked at my father, who offered only silence and the dull rattle of his fork. I can still do it, I said finally. It came out weak. Gianni waved me off. No one wants to see that. Better learn a real trade. Everyone nodded. My world grew smaller, bounded by their certainty. After dinner, I lingered in the courtyard, watching the moths flutter around the lamp. Somewhere, a guitar's lonely chord drifted through open shutters. I made a promise to myself. I would film their stories, with or without La Sapienza's rubber stamp. The next year bled away in misery. I worked temp jobs, cafes at dawn, unloading market crates at dusk, handing out flyers for a pizza joint on weekends. My camera sat in an old duffel bag until my fingertips ached to use it. At night, I wandered with it under my coat, eyes on the city's sounds and faces. In Trastevere, I approached a violinist named Nadia as she packed up for the night. Her hair was wild, her laughter quick. You want to film me? She asked, skeptical. I want to see who you are, I replied, not just who you seem. She raised an eyebrow. Do I get paid? I fished for euros, promising what little I had. She shrugged, amused by my desperation. Fine, but only if you find out how I ended up here. Her story unfolded, jagged and strange. Refugee camps, lost documents, a love for Paganini, nights on cold benches. She wept once when I asked about her mother. I filmed the tears, then lowered the camera, feeling like a thief. Nights blurred, Maurizio, the guitarist with a prison tattoo, Celeste, the opera singer whose voice could crack the moon. Piece by delicate piece, Rome's streets opened to me. Editing on battered software, I stitched their lives into something like a symphony. It was rough, far from perfect. But when I played it back, alone in my tiny flat, I felt sure this mattered. More than any safe thesis, more than the laughter at family dinners. I sent my documentary, one burned DVD, to festivals. No response. I worked, filmed, slept. The ache didn't leave, becoming part of me. A sharp, hollow thing behind my ribs. I told no one at home, not even when I screened it for 5 people in a makeshift cinema in San Lorenzo. When I passed street musicians, they knew. Valerio Documentarista, it was the only title I answered to. Then in winter an email came, IDFA in Amsterdam accepted my work for a short program. I almost didn't tell anyone. At the kitchen table my mother watched me with worry. When I blurted out, "My film is going to Amsterdam," she blinked, confused. "No one in the family ever left Italy," she said, as if that explained everything. My father nodded but said nothing. My cousins jeered. Someone muttered about wasted time. I packed anyway. In Amsterdam, I sat in a crowded theatre, twisting a napkin in my lap. When the credits rolled, people cried, real, open tears, not the performative kind. A woman hugged me, thanking me for making her see musicians as people. My phone buzzed with invitations. Festivals, interviews, a segment for Rye, everything spun quickly. Back home I kept working. Venice Film Festival followed. My name crept into papers. Friends from university reached out with thin apologies. Even the street musicians cheered when I brought the first copy to Trastevia. Nadia wiped her eyes. Still, my family watched from a distance. Mama cut articles from La Repubblica but tucked them behind her recipes. Gianni boasted to neighbors but never to my face. Each homecoming felt like being a ghost. Years passed, I grew, learned tricks of the craft, filmed further and wider, Naples, Palermo, even as far as New York on a grant. Rome remained in my bones. Sometimes, working late, I wondered if my family was right. After all, success felt fragile. The weight of their laughter still echoed. But then, an invitation arrived from the Rome Film Fest. They wanted to close the festival with my latest feature, a portrait of the evolving city through its unknown artists, voices from the margins. Rai would broadcast it live. I would screen it at the Auditorium Parco della Musica. I walked through Garbetella in the week before, rehearsing what I would say if they came, if any family showed up, or if they'd laugh from afar, sharing a drink in the kitchen as Rai rolled by in the background. The morning of the screening, the city was hushed under a sky heavy with unspilled rain. I knocked on my parents' apartment door, awkward in new shoes, invitation in hand. "Will you come?" I asked, voice low. Mama pressed her lips together, searching my face. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," I admitted, "but I want you there." She nodded. My father laid his hand on my shoulder, silent support. That evening, the auditorium filled with people, critics, filmmakers, strangers. The Rai camera crews darted around, testing lights. I wandered backstage, nerves fluttering like birds in my stomach. In the front row, I spotted my mother, her hair perfectly curled, eyes wide and glassy. My father wore his best shirt, collar stiff. Even Uncle Gianni was there, squeezed next to Luca, who shifted in his suit uncomfortably. My heart hammered as the lights dimmed and the film began. It ran in gentle, aching bursts, faces of the city's margins, music drifting through alleyways, the slap of rain on old stone steps, laughter in market stalls. Nadia's violin threaded in and out, that same piece she'd played years ago in the cool Roman twilight. I watched the crowd, watched my family. My mother gripped my father's hand. Gianni frowned, but his gaze didn't break. Luca's jaw was tight. As the credits rolled, applause rose like thunder, not the polite kind. This was fierce, grateful, deeply moved. People surged to their feet. I was ushered onto the stage, lights bright, applause so loud it rang in my eardrums. But the moment that stilled me, the proof I'd longed for, was when I looked down and saw my mother, her face wet with tears. Gianni, for once, did not hide his expression. His face was raw with something like pride. The after-party in the lobby was a blur, handshakes, praise, the buzz of journalists. Still, my feet led me back to my family. Mama hugged me tight, her cheek against mine. My father couldn't meet my eyes. He simply pressed something into my pocket, a St. Cecilia medal, small and warm. Even Gianni clapped me on the back, his voice rough. "You did it, ragazzo, you showed us." On the drive home, Rome glowed in the nights. Starlight filtered over the river, and apartment windows flickered, each square a world of its own. I rested my head against the cold glass, exhausted, full, grief and clarity entwined in my veins. I understood then what success really meant. It was never about proving them wrong, but about returning, whole, unashamed, with a story that belonged to all of us. In the kitchen again, my family around me, I felt it. I was home. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. Because the city had lent me its song and I'd carried it back for them to hear.